The following is produced by 5 Star Productions USA, which is solely responsible for its editorial content and is sponsored in part by a grant from Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care.
This permit to drive is not a license to pollute, but every year about 2.5 million students graduate from driver's education classes. And like all drivers, they'll generate emissions, consume gasoline, and wear out other automotive products. Maybe everyone behind the wheel should get a little environmental education. Hi, I'm Corey James, and this is Today's Environment, where we take a close look at our planet and examine what's going on to help sustain it. Imagine a parking lot so big it could hold over 10 million cars. That could be the amount of space we sacrifice for the automobiles we throw away each year. Fortunately, automobile recycling is a growing industry, and this next segment shows us why. These old buggies were good ones, and they served us well. But how do you retire old cars? That's a question that's asked about 10 million times a year, and there's only one right answer: recycle them.
Automobile recycling may be one of the most comprehensive recycling programs in America today. Currently, about 94% of all scrapped automobiles get collected for reuse and reprocessing. The member companies of the American Automobile Manufacturers Association, Chrysler, Ford, and GM, have joined together in an effort to recycle automobiles and incorporate recycled materials into their designs. That's one reason why retired vehicles rarely end up in a landfill.
Automotive recycling is a well-developed industry. In the United States, there's over 12,000 dismantlers and 200 shredders.
When a vehicle reaches retirement, it commonly goes to an automobile dismantler who removes recyclable materials and claims any parts that can be sold. After being dismantled, the remainder of the car gets compacted and sent to a shredder, a large machine that cuts up the hulk into pieces the size of a fist. A magnet separates the ferrous metals like steel and iron from the non-ferrous metals like copper and aluminum. All that remains is a mixture of materials called automobile shredder residue, or ASR. Plastics, rubber, glass, seat foam, and other materials that are not recycled are sent to municipal landfills. Even though about 75% of the weight of the car is currently recycled, the members of the American Automobile Manufacturers Association want to improve that even more. To enable cooperative research, the 3 companies formed an organization called the U.S. Car Vehicle Recycling Partnership to develop new technologies for recycling the glass, the seat foam, plastics, fluids, and other materials from the vehicles.
U.S. automakers are working together to reduce the amount of ASR. Plastics make up the largest percentage of this waste and are the first focus of this vehicle recycling center. Of course, the ultimate goal is to maximize the percentage of the vehicle which can be recycled. Today's auto designers are nearly as concerned with recycling their vehicles as they are with putting them together.
Increasingly, consumers are considering environmental factors in their buying decisions.
As automakers continue to develop recyclable vehicles and use recycled materials, they're on the road to putting Mother Nature back in the driver's seat.
You could heat 250,000 homes a day with the energy used to produce your daily delivery of junk mail. The thought leaves me cold. Get involved with Today's Environment today.
Be all that you can be. It's a current commercial slogan, but the concept can be applied in today's environment. Getting the most out of what we use can reduce consumption and pollution. This next segment examines that idea. Does anyone know what a catalyst is?
A list of different kinds of cats.
Someone who mentally helps cattle.
Someone who milks a camel.
A cat calendar.
It may be several years before they completely understand what catalysts are, but their future could depend on them.
A catalyst is a compound that can increase the rate at which a chemical reaction takes place, yet itself remains the same. Added to fossil fuels like oil, diesel, or gasoline, certain catalysts can help them burn cleaner, hotter, and more efficiently. The emissions from these massive trucks were dramatically reduced recently by the addition of a catalyst, or combustion manager, developed by Ferrox Incorporated. Inspired by work on burn rate modifiers for advanced rocket propellants, scientists produced this concentrated synergistic multi-component formula that can enhance both the storage life and the combustion efficiency of fossil fuels. When produced in a highly active concentrated form, this catalyst can be added to fossil fuels without altering the specifications. When added to a truck fleet's diesel supply, it can keep both fuel and engines clean, which reduces emissions. Layers of deposits absorb fuel and insulate it from the flame's heat. This can create more deposits and additional emissions from unburned or partially burned fuel. Surface modifiers in the formula remove existing deposits and then continue to keep the surface clean, which produces a more efficient combustion environment. Working as a catalyst, the additive lowers the energy of activation required for the combustion of the fuel components and the exposed deposit surfaces.
That means they can burn more completely and release more of their energy at a lower temperature, which translates to lower emissions and lower energy consumption.
Combustion managers can enhance the burning characteristics of all types of fossil fuels. An oil-based furnace can improve its efficiency just as well as a diesel truck or gasoline engine.
Adding a Ferrox formula to your fuel supply can bring significant environmental benefits in terms of lower energy consumption and lower emissions. And some added benefits to reducing pollution in this manner are improved fuel economy, and because Ferrox removes all the deposits from an engine, lower maintenance costs. By comparing the exhaust from these two vehicles, it's very clear that the engine using treated fuel is burning much cleaner than the engine burning non-treated fuel.
Keeping our air clean and healthful looms as a major challenge in today's environment. And if a new family of fuel additives can help reduce the toll combustion takes on our planet, then this technology may just be the catalyst to clear the air for a whole new generation. Coming up on Today's Environment, what you may not know about nuclear energy and managing the most important environmental restoration project in history. Next.
For years, we've been generating the majority of our energy needs by burning fuel. But harmful emissions from the combustion create enormous environmental problems. Our future depends on finding cleaner energy sources to replace the heavy emission-producing methods. And here's a look at the alternative.
The greenhouse effect. Trapped carbon dioxide gas in our atmosphere that reflects escaping heat back to Earth. If not checked, many experts believe that global warming could wreak havoc on the environment. It's our insatiable demand for energy that created this potential problem, and now it must be averted. The Clinton administration's Climate Change Action Plan spells out guidelines for reducing the greenhouse effect and cites nuclear energy as one source that will continue to play a major role in curbing carbon dioxide emissions. It's our second largest source of electricity, producing 20% of our power. According to the Nuclear Energy Institute, nuclear energy and hydropower score high marks as the two cleanest forms of large-scale power. Nuclear plants do not burn fuels and therefore release no harmful emissions. Without our 109 nuclear power plants, CO2 emissions from power production would be 30% higher. For all the electricity they produce, nuclear power plants create relatively little waste. And they're working hard to minimize that waste and continue to make on-site storage safe. Operating under strictly enforced regulatory guidelines, today's nuclear power plants also work well with their local environment. In addition to the ecological benefits of providing a clean source of electricity, the nuclear plants themselves often create environmental sanctuaries on the land that they occupy. Constant monitoring of air, water, and soil ensures environmental quality. These monitoring programs often extend to the study and protection of the resident plant and wildlife populations. Nuclear plants across the United States take pride in their environmental sensitivity. bald eagle nesting sites, safe areas for endangered newborn crocodiles, fish hatchery programs, and sanctuary for the endangered elephant seal are just a few of the many ongoing wildlife programs that can be found at these plants across the country. As they generate electricity, water must be taken in for cooling. That's why most plants operate near lakes, rivers, or oceans. After cooling, the clean, slightly warmed water that plants discharge attracts fish and fishermen. In the ever-growing search to generate power and preserve the environment, satisfying the demand for clean electricity becomes more and more critical. Nuclear power plants are a major source of electricity and contribute to an environmentally responsible energy strategy. They provide a clean energy option that cannot be ignored.
You alone can wipe out 10 pounds of carbon dioxide emissions every year for the rest of your life and beyond with one simple act: plant a tree. Get involved with today's environment today.
People say there's no use crying over spilt milk, and that might be right, but still someone needs to clean it up. America's nuclear weapons program spilled plenty of contaminated, radioactive, and hazardous materials. Now it's time to clean it up, and this may help.
In 1943, the Defense Department appropriated 1,000 desolate square miles in eastern Washington for the top-secret Manhattan Project, which ended World War II. For the next 40 years, the nuclear defense mission continued. Hanford produced plutonium for the nuclear arms race and created the most enormous radioactive and chemical waste disposal problem ever in the U.S. Now, what was once the largest construction project ever conceived has become the most complex and most important environmental restoration project in history. The task staggers the imagination of the most seasoned environmental scientists. Over 60 million gallons of radioactive waste lies buried in 177 steel tanks located near the center of the site. Over the years, nearly 1 million gallons leaked out, creating what could become a potential threat to groundwater and the thriving cities nearby. 625,000 cubic meters of solid waste lies buried in the ground. It must be managed for centuries while the radioactivity decays. But what sounds like a waste management nightmare is becoming the working laboratory that allows us to develop the cleanup and disposal methods that will ensure a safe future for the entire planet. In 1989, the Department of Energy agreed to conform to environmental guidelines. To this end, they challenged the Westinghouse-Hanford Company with the task of managing the enormous restoration of this contaminated wasteland. Conservative estimates set the cost of the cleanup at more than $50 to $60 billion over a period of 30 to 40 years. After 5 years, there has been considerable progress in cleaning up the site as well as resolving serious safety issues. Over 35,000 gallons of contaminated solvents stored in underground tanks and drums have been removed and destroyed. And over 7,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil has been isolated, reducing contamination from seeping into the nearby Columbia River. But before any full-scale action can begin, scientists must study each situation carefully. New high-tech tools and restoration techniques must be invented, modified, tested, and proven before they can be widely used to render the area safe. Old buildings are coming down, and new treatment facilities now under construction will mean an end to untreated discharges to the soil or the river. Engineers, scientists, and technicians push the envelope of technology further and further every day in their quest to design new devices and innovative disposal and containment methods. Without a doubt, the Hanford restoration is the greatest environmental challenge of this and the next century. What scientists learn here in this living laboratory during the site's epic cleanup campaign just may give us the tools to manage and control the world's waste until the end of time. Learn the concept of mitigation banking and how it promotes responsible land use. Plus, forest survival has a new idea. Next on Today's Environment.
It's an old story. A development goes up in an environmentally sensitive area, And then environmentalists, lawmakers, and builders engage in three-way warfare. And for the wildlife, it's there goes the neighborhood. But it doesn't have to be that way, as our next feature dramatically shows.
Open an account in this bank and you won't get a calendar or a free toaster. What you may get instead are new communities that coexist in harmony with the environment. The concept is called mitigation banking, and it's one of numerous creative solutions to developing environmentally sensitive land that are starting to gain wide acceptance.
Mitigation banking is a result of cooperative efforts between developers, regulators, and environmentalists. Three groups who have usually spent more time at each other's throats than by their side.
That these traditional antagonists are now engaging in constructive dialogue can be credited to groups like the Urban Land Institute, a non-profit organization that promotes land use that is environmentally responsible. Take, for example, the issue of wetlands. The general feeling is that they're important, even though we can't always define exactly what constitutes a wetland. Still, thanks to the leadership of groups like the Urban Land Institute and its ability to bring diverse groups together to solve problems related to land use, members of the regulated regulatory and environmental communities have reached a consensus on development in wetlands areas. First and foremost, quality wetlands must be preserved. Wetlands that are non-functional should, whenever possible, be restored and enhanced. And finally, whenever wetlands are unavoidably lost, new ones should be created to replace them. Minimizing the impact to environmentally sensitive lands through restoration, enhancement, and creation of new wetlands is a process called mitigation. While it sounds great on paper, and it's been done successfully around the country, mitigation isn't an automatic cure-all. For one thing, a scattering of relatively small parcels of new or restored wetlands of poor quality probably won't tempt wildlife to return. For another, opportunities for on-site mitigation may sometimes be limited. For that reason, entrepreneurs, conservation groups, and government agencies have begun to acquire significant areas of degraded wetlands and restore them, creating a sort of land bank. Developers can buy credits in this mitigation bank. Should their projects unavoidably encroach on wetlands, the appropriate number of credits will be withdrawn.
Techniques like mitigation and mitigation banking are hopeful signs that if people can live harmoniously in the natural world, well, the natural world can hack a wild duffer or two. Tropical forests. We're losing them at an alarming rate, due mainly to poverty and exploding populations in those regions. Now, as much as we've learned about the rainforest in the last few years, we haven't figured out how to save them. This next idea may help.
It's a double-edged sword. Believe it or not, this logger may be a rainforest's potential hope for survival. To understand what may sound like twisted logic, consider this. Over 90% of tropical rainforest deforestation comes from clear cutting for agriculture and firewood, and not tree harvesting for wood products. In developing nations, many trees are sacrificed for crops. When poverty and exploding populations tax existing clear land beyond its limits, forested areas become the target for clearing and development. One way to prevent this wholesale devastation of the forest may be to bring the economic value of the land with trees to a comparable or higher level than the land without trees. Many companies from around the world involved in the wood products industry joined together in an organization called the International Wood Products Association, or IHPA. They suggest that responsible forestry is not to blame for deforestation, and they argue that maintaining and raising the value of wood products will help sustain the forests. In 1988, they launched the CURE, or CURE program. The letters stand for Conservation, Utilization, Reforestation, and Education, which are the four elements they feel are necessary for the survival of the forests. Scientists, conservationists, and other concerned coalitions like the Tropical Forest Foundation also advocate integrated forest management techniques that allow harvesting trees for their wood only in a sustainable pattern. Proper management of yearly harvests can ensure that the forests continue to thrive, while the trees take on an economic value beyond that of the barren land. In the developing world, where most of the tropical rainforests grow, the economics of survival often outweigh the aesthetics of natural wonders. forest loss may not stop until there is an economic incentive to keep the trees standing. One approach is by adding value to the wood products with local processing operations that can create more jobs, stimulate trade, and generate additional revenue.
As soon as your income from forestry or any other associated activity is lower than the income you could get by farming, you have problems.
By focusing profits on the processing rather than the harvesting, less trees need to be cut in order for the local economy to thrive. The forest can then become a national renewable resource that drives an entire industry. The incentive to conserve that resource for the benefit of future generations makes responsible forest management a key to a healthy economy. We need the world's forests to help sustain our air, climate, and the millions of animal and plant species who make their home in the woods. Responsible management could make sustaining the forests profitable and provide a better alternative than clearing the land to create farms. It could be our worst environmental nightmare, but when a forest loses its economic value, it might not be long before it loses its life.
Our rainforests deserve a break today? A typical 4-ounce hamburger made from rainforest beef involves the destruction of about 55 square feet of tropical forest. Now, we need those jungles for their abundant ecosystems and because they help eliminate the primary global warming gas from the atmosphere. Now, either we find another place for the cows to roam, or we may end up cooking our own planet. The ideas featured on this show are living proof that we can tackle the challenges facing our world. Join us again next time as we explore more environmental solutions on Today's Environment.
The preceding program was sponsored in part by a grant from Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care. This has been a presentation of 5 Star Productions USA.